Alright, so now that you've got your parts and you know what's what, I've actually put in some resistors here that I'm kind of ready to solder. But before I did that, this isn't totally necessary, but it does kind of help. This IPA isopropyl alcohol stuff that you can get from Jaycar for like $10 or whatever, you just kind of spray it on there and then clean the PCB before you do anything. Yeah, I think just like having it clean just helps with the transfer and all that kind of stuff. So I'll show you on this. I've already pushed through my different resistors. Like the kit for this particular build runs you through each step. So just, yeah, same thing again, just double check and triple check where everything is kind of going. And then once you've kind of put the resistors in, flip the board over and then just kind of pull them through. So they're kind of like as flush with the board. It's kind of hard to see on this, but kind of like, so it's just like sitting directly on the board. You want it to be really flush as you can. It's not a huge deal if it's not, but it definitely helps just kind of keep everything clean and tidy. So yeah, now that they're all in place, the next thing I want to do is actually solder. So I'm just going to flip the board over, kind of put that back into place. So yeah, you probably won't be able to see it super well, but I'll pull it up closer so you can have a look. So before I actually solder, first thing I want to do is get this flux, which is like the no clean flux pen thing that I sent you. This is the same thing, it's just in a tube. So the flux pretty much just like keeps the pad nice and clean and helps the heat transfer really well and kind of like sucks the solder kind of into the right place. Like you can do it without this stuff, but I find that since I've been using this, the builds have been kind of way more successful. So let's just say I'll do this little guy here. First thing I want to do is just put a little bit on there. You don't need much of it at all. Just put a little squirt, and then I'll get my actual soldering iron ready to go. I'll kind of just place that onto the pad, which is the little metal circle thingies. Let that kind of heat up for a second, and then put on some solder. Alright, so now I've got that one, this guy here kind of soldered. Hard for you to kind of see. Now, the trick is to this, you don't want a lot of solder at all. You kind of want it to be as flat and kind of flush with the board as you can, and it should look like a tiny little mountain in a way. Like, yeah, really hard to see on this, but just like watch some YouTube videos and stuff on it. But that's kind of the trick, is not kind of putting on too much and making sure that it's transferred really well. And if you're not kind of happy with how that's gone, if you just say you've put on too much and it doesn't look right, you can do something which is called reflowing. And that's essentially just taking the same part that we've soldered, putting the soldering iron back on it and kind of reflowing the solder. So it'll heat up again and kind of push itself around a little bit more. So that's how that kind of works. And now with the desoldering stuff that I told you to get, so this wick stuff here, looks like this kind of copper stuff. This is how you get the solder actually off it, because it's a bit of a bitch to remove. So what you want to do is kind of just sit it kind of on the pad or the part that you've just soldered, and just kind of put your soldering iron on top. Let it heat up for a second. And it'll kind of pull the solder off. So now you can see that the solder, well, if you can see on that, the solder has transferred to the copper wire, and now it's desoldered, and now I can just pull that out if I wanted to. So just getting rid of the solder. And another way that you can do it as well if you get something called a solder sucker. So then you can kind of heat up the pad. So it's easy to kind of do it this way. Actually, I'll flip it around. Too much of an angle, it's not staying in this holder. Okay, so you can heat it through from the other side if there's any little bits of solder on there. Then you get the solder sucker thingy and you literally just press it and then it sucks the solder out. There's also this little guy here that you can use, which is kind of just a sucky thing. Same thing, you just heat up the other side and then push it on there like that and it will suck the solder out. So yeah, like you'll find yourself doing that a bit if you think that you haven't got it working, or especially when you're going through and testing stuff out. Yeah, that's like a whole nother thing within itself. But yeah, that kind of the main things that I do to kind of start. So like I said before, the biggest thing is just check all your components and your values, making sure that they're the right thing, going in the right place. Just read the kit really carefully and just apply everything really kind of slowly. Use your soldering wick, add on a bit of solder, and yeah, you should be good to go. Like, I don't know what you're kind of building, but most of the kits that I've done so far, the instructions have been pretty good, and you don't really need to have like a background knowledge on how this stuff kind of actually works, but you'll kind of figure that out a little bit more. So when it comes to like troubleshooting and stuff like that, like I don't really know too much about that yet, but you kind of just do that with the multimeter. It's all about just like reading the schematics and making sure everything is kind of connecting as it should. But yeah, you'll figure that out as you kind of go along.